Okay. All right, let me port over. All right. How's everyone doing today? I hope everyone's doing well. Uh, as you can see, we got a new background now. Let me see if those. Okay, now it does work. All right. But yeah, got a new background now. Decided to get myself out of the space that I was in. So now I am in a little greenhouse. Nice little greenhouse. Yeah, I hope everyone is doing well today. I know I am. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be doing this again for the seventh time for today's cannabis talk. Basically, what today we will be discussing pretty much what will be happening come January 1st. Here in California, we're going to have a lot of regulation changes, but it's kind of weird as far as how these changes will be made and what time they will be made at. Just because, like I've said many times before, the Bureau of Cannabis Control for California, they constantly change these regulations and don't really know, I guess, the end result to the change, basically. What I kind of want to be talking about today is that I will kind of go over what has happened in 2017 and then what has happened this year, and then what my projections or what my thoughts will be for this next year. Just for those of you that aren't in California, California has changed their regulations pretty much the whole time throughout 2017, 2018, and 19, and even the many years before that as well. But it wasn't until this year was when they actually became fully recreational. That's why I'll kind of talk about what the quote good old days was about, back in 2017, back before the regulation changes. And even then, still 6 months into this year, the regulations were pretty lax. They surely weren't as strict because everyone needed like a grace period. And for some reason, they made that grace period into July, or go into July, and pretty much had a cutoff right there. And then even with the new regulations after July from this year, things have not been going so well. So let's go back to about my freshman year of college. Started out working for a delivery service, and it was actually kind of easy to get a job there. All I had to do was pretty much just buy from them, and it was kind of sketch because they couldn't meet me on campus because it's federally illegal. So obviously you can't smoke on school premises, let alone do a drug deal. So basically, yeah, I had bought from them like probably 2 or 3 times, and I just asked like if they were hiring any drivers or anything like that, and I was just looking to get some experience in the cannabis industry. Getting my experience there was pretty fun, actually, I have to say. What my job was, I was a delivery driver, right? And all I pretty much did was my boss would send me a text message, and I would go to whatever address that they would send me to, and I'd have my briefcase full of stuff. And it's kind of crazy the way they did it back then. So basically, before I started the job, I would be given a briefcase that was full of like weed stacked in jars, and it was like there were special jars so they could like stack on top of each other and screw on, so you could just hold like 4 of them. Also, my boss was using fish toolkit box things, where it's all sectioned off, and he would use that for concentrates. He'd be like a MacGyver almost, trying to use different stuff for different purposes. That was definitely quite an experience there, and as it is, I got paid in cash and in weed, and it was pretty much all under the table. There wasn't really much regulation or much regulating period going on during that time. I wasn't really sure where the flowers were coming from. As far as the concentrates, it looked super dark. For those of you that know what concentrates look like nowadays, they know that it's pretty like golden amber. Yeah, things were definitely a lot different back then, and that's like the one thing that I do like about the new regulation changes is that it actually educates us as consumers about what we're actually consuming, what kind of cannabis we're consuming, and what it's actually made with. So that was pretty fun. I mean, I got paid about $200 a day with, with probably like a half ounce of weed on top of that. So wasn't a bad gig for a freshman in college, you know? So yeah, I had a great time doing that. But because I didn't sign anything that showed that I was working for them, like a 1099 or a W-4 or W-2s or anything like that. There was one semester where I was coming back from Christmas break and I was ready for work, had texted them and had texted my boss, called him, and he just didn't respond to me. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm out of a job now. A couple of years went by, and actually so this was one of the first storefronts that actually popped up in my area. I decided to go check it out. They were pretty cool spot. They were really small though. They were really small. Probably say about maybe 500 square feet, if that. Working there definitely got me a lot more experience. Granted that it was a storefront, I would be interacting with people a lot more, and they would be coming to me trying to cure their ailments, you know. Given I didn't really have too much cannabis experience or cannabis knowledge, because I mean, for the most part, when I was working at that delivery service, people just asked like, oh, what's the most fire shit you got? And then I'd be like, oh, well, this stuff's fire because it tests super high. At least that's what I think. That's even if they had testing. So now working at the new spot definitely got me a lot more experience. I got to work with some cancer patients. I got to work with a lot of different vendors. So I got to know a lot more of the products that I was recommending to people. And that's pretty much where I got most of my cannabis experience, was being at that storefront. And actually, it was kind of messed up because in the area that we were at, it was a pretty conservative area. So given the fact that we were a medical cannabis dispensary, conservative people don't really like that. So they were getting calls into the county pretty much daily saying that, oh, we don't want these people here. We need to get them out. So yeah, it was kind of messed up. So as I was getting more experience there, they trusted me a lot more. I mean, I'm a pretty honest dude, at least from what I feel. But they actually let me in on the purchasing. So the inventory manager or the purchasing manager, which was really just one of my other bosses, because I had two bosses pretty much. And so he would let me go into the room when a vendor was coming in and they were showing off their fat pounds of turkey bags of flowers, you know. And that was actually that was pretty fun. That was like the first time I ever got to see like an actual pound in front of my face and then get to like stick my head in it and like smell it. Regulations have certainly changed a lot since then, and now everything comes in little jars, you know. Yeah, it was quite an interesting experience. That's where I kind of got to know a little bit what is considered good and bad quality. Now that I think of it, the shady stuff that my old job was doing was pretty much they were taking product that we had and they were driving it to either the Bay Area or they were going down to LA, and they would sell the product, which is highly illegal. They were not the only ones that were doing that. There were a lot of other dispensaries out there that were doing something very similar. So, hey, I've heard of some dispensaries even selling pounds and shipping it to another state. So, I can just kind of give you an idea of, you know, this is supposed to be the regulated market, and that's how shady things were. Just to kind of put that into perspective for you. And also, the other thing that was different compared to now is that we were able to do a lot of the packaging in-house. So whenever we would get the pounds in turkey bags, we would have to put them in jars, weigh them out and stuff like that, or grind them up to make pre-rolls. Obviously now you can't do that. Everything all has to be tested, packaged, and have all of its warning labels and all that stuff before it even gets to the dispensary, the retail shop. Years went on there. I think years. So it was really only like 2 years that I was there. It was pretty on and off just because I was going to school as well. And there I was seeing that there was really not a lot of employee appreciation. And me, I don't really ask for much. You know, I don't even ask for a pat on the back. But, you know, when we work long hours from, you know, open to close 10, it's from like 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 at night. And, everything is going well. At least from my perspective, everything seemed to be going smoothly. But then, with a boss, they always will find something wrong. So he seemed to only have just straight criticism, which wasn't even like really constructive. It was just straight criticism. So I was like, well, we're going above and beyond for you, and we're making more money than we ever have, and yet we still get the short end of the stick. And obviously our pay did not reflect that. We started at, I want to say I started at like $11 an hour, which was terrible, I'm telling you. So obviously I needed a change, and luckily enough, while I was trying to start my own cannabis point of sale system, I got a tip about another dispensary being opened, which is now the place I'm working at currently. They were starting at 15 an hour, so I was like, yeah, why not move? And they actually had a much different mission, and pretty much their mission is to, help first and sell second. I mean, at the end of the day, we care about the patient first, educating them as to what cannabis can do for them, and they can decide on whether or not they want to partake or not. That dispensary pretty much started in September, or I think October of last year. So obviously we had to go through those regulation changes come 2018, and boy, we had to pretty much clear house. We had to do a massive blowout sale. So basically what we had to do come January 1st was that we had to pretty much sell everything that wasn't compliant. Now, what I mean by not compliant is that, one, it needed to have a specific government warning label that was not implemented in 2017. Everything needed to be childproof, and only certain products were actually childproof. All of the edibles had to be reduced down to 100 milligram max, which was pretty much all of the edible companies out there, most of them anyway, which definitely made a huge influence on us and made a huge impact on us as well, because we were like, okay, well, now what are we going to do with all of these products that we have gotten to know and our patients have gotten to know, and they've pretty much gotten on a daily regimen, and this is now their medication, quote quote, and now it's not going to be there anymore. The one company that comes to mind, and I'm only going to say their name just because it doesn't look like they're coming back anytime soon, is Chronic Essentials. Chronic Essentials was basically a all-purpose oil, a cannabis oil that you could eat straight up, or you could smoke it, or you could pretty much do anything with it. And it had a really high CBD content for its high CBD syringe, and it was doing wonders for a lot of people. And then once that company pretty much dissipated, we had a lot of upset patients, and there wasn't much that we could do about it because, I mean, the company is dead now. The only thing that we really could do was find an alternative for them. And for the most part, there are many alternatives out there, and there's only going to be more come this new year and all the new regulation changes. Yeah, definitely going through January 1st was quite a surprise. And then the vendors were given a 6-month grace period. They had up until July to, get everything right, and then that's when the cutoff was. So yeah, they, within that 6-month period, we were seeing a lot of companies rise from the ashes, but then only to be taken down again once the BCC changes up some more regulations. So it pretty much ended up being a money game at that point, because obviously when you have to change your packaging and stuff like that, all of that costs money. And especially going to childproof packaging, which was the biggest thing for a lot of people, because for the most part, trying to put certain items into childproof packaging would just be them using their regular packaging and then putting it in a childproof bag. It made the inventory terrible because that way we couldn't put as much stuff onto the floor because all of the bags were taking up so much space. Yeah, so that's pretty much how 2018 went. And then I mean after July came, all of those companies that pretty much stayed consistent throughout that whole 6-month period were there for the rest of the 6 months in the year. And we've seen a lot more companies pop up too. They always do. And for the most part, everybody has been consistent with their products. It's just been just once track and trace comes into play, come 2019, we will start seeing a lot more differences as far as the intake with the inventory goes, because we will have to start entering stuff in a whole different way than how we're entering it in now. So that's pretty much 2018. And now 2019, man. It's, from what I've been researching at least, and from what I have seen already, it's going to be, it might not actually, well, it might not be that bad. All right. A lot of the changes that they're making are, for the most part, pretty minor. So 2019, according to the BCC, the vendors will not have to have childproof packaging anymore. And for the most part, I've talked to the vendors and they're going to keep the same packaging because, there's no reason for them to change it up if they're only going to implement it again in 2020, which is what they will be doing from what they said. But yeah, aside from the childproof packaging, like last year, we had to do the blowout sale we even did a blowout sale July 1st because that was the hard cutoff. Because 6 months before that, we thought that was the hard cutoff, but they're like, oh, no, you guys are good. Actually, you guys actually have another 6 months for you to get it right. And so then once that 6 months was over, that's when the hard cutoff was. That's when we had to really have a blowout sale for all of the stuff that wasn't compliant because we couldn't sell it. We couldn't sell any of the stuff that wasn't compliant after July 1st. So granted, this year, now we know that we have another 6-month period. So now this is, I'm talking about July 2019, July 1st, 2019. We have another 6 months to get everything right. Like I said, stuff's really it's not looking that bad. It's pretty much the same as it was last year. Just now we know a little bit more on what's happening. So again, July 1st, they will have a hard cutoff on all of the cannabis products that aren't compliant. For, I guess, the pet side, come 2019, January 1st, actually, veterinarians will now actually be able to discuss cannabis with their patients. So, because before, I guess, and I find it funny because I was actually getting patients already telling me, oh yeah, my vet told me to use CBD, so that's why I'm here. And then I see this and I'm like, well, they were doing that already. And it's funny because it says they're allowed to discuss but not recommend cannabis. So I'm like, well, yeah, I guess they can't write a prescription. Obviously, you can't write a prescription for any of this stuff. But I'm glad that they can finally be open about it. They can have an open conversation about using cannabis with their pet and, discussing what has worked for other people and what might work for them. I mean, I can only imagine what that conversation is like. Be like, oh yeah, well, it worked for Billy the dog and it helped with his hip dysplasia. And now he's walking again just by taking some 20-to-1 CBD. I mean, it may work for your dog that also has hip dysplasia. I'm not too sure. But that's just what I'm saying. It's one step forward. This next one, which I also thought was kind of interesting, and this is coming from, I guess, the dispensary owner's side, and that CEOs, board of directors, investors, anybody that has, I think it says 20%, anywhere like it's like 20% and above, they will be considered as owners. even though they may not actually be the real owner of the company, if they have at least a 20% stake, then they will be considered an owner. And I was actually talking to my coworker about this, and from what he was saying, the reason why the BCC is doing something like this is probably because, if something goes wrong with regulations, or, the dispensary or the company is doing something, I guess, behind the scenes that isn't compliant, everyone that has a 20% plus stake in the business will be held accounted for. And that makes a lot of sense, because obviously the people that have the most in the business should know the most about what's going on. That was definitely an interesting fact. I'm sure not too many people, not too many California business owners may know about that one. Yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind for sure. And the next thing is that, at least for my dispensary that I work at, and I'm sure many other dispensaries out there, they are currently on a temporary license. Now, the temporary license, depending on when you got your license, will determine your cutoff period. So, say you got your license July 6th or whatever of this year. So if it goes for another year, you have until July 6th to get your permanent license. And apparently, and I was actually looking at the licensing requirements and how much you actually need to pay for a license, which is, I thought, was kind of insane. You have to pay $1,000 already just to even have and send the application. That's not even you getting approved. If you get approved, then that's another $4,000 all the way up to like $96,000 for your license, which is a huge gap. I know. As far as how much you make will determine how much you have to pay for your license. So I have right here, if you're making less than or equal to $50,000 a year, then your license will be $2,500. And then if your company is making $6 million to $7.5 million, then you will have to pay around $57,000, which is actually, from what I found out today, is where my dispensary is at, is around that 6 mil to 7.5 mil range. So they have to pay $57,000 just to have their license. And that's not even like getting permits. That's not paying people. That's already the initial thing to even be considered a cannabis business. You have to pay $58,000, adding that on that $1,000 for the application fee, just to get by. And then for 7.5 million and over, it's $96,000. What I actually found funny was that what my manager was making SOPs. Apparently now they will have a template of SOPs for you to fill out, and you can just do it super easily rather than having to make your own SOP for pretty much everything, which I feel the BCC should have done already, given the fact that they're the ones that are making all of these laws for how to destroy your cannabis when you get a return, or how you're supposed to be checking in inventory. So I'm glad the BCC is finally doing something to help us. We'll see how that goes. I'm not too sure if they're actually going to go through with it, given the fact that there's still 3 more days left within this year and they could change everything if they wanted to. So no more SOPs, and now they will be having pre-established forms that you will need to just fill in the blanks. So I guess it's kind of nice. This next one, granted, the article that I had read was, I think it was like July 14th of this year. And a lot of the cannabis regulations have changed within that time. And I kind of read a Cliff Notes version of it. And this is what they say, quote, "You won't be able to pump the smell of cannabis to your licensed premises via a vaporizer device or diffuser." To me, that sounds like how restaurants pump out the smell of the food. It's like the opposite. They got probably like a vape vacuum just going into the dispensary or something like that. Now, I'm not too sure that that might have been interpreted wrong, but I just thought that was funny as hell when I read that. I mean, usually for the most part, and at least from the dispensaries that I have seen, they were all pumping out the smell of weed, and they had like a filtration system so it wouldn't like, reek once it gets out. So those are pretty much all of the regulation changes, at least from what I've read so far. There's definitely a lot more out there, and I'll probably go more into them next year, given the fact that next year is 3 days from now. Ain't it crazy? But we will be having to do a lot of work at the dispensary and making sure that we are compliant by carrying all of the compliant products. But at the same time, we get a nice grace period of 6 months. So, it won't be too bad. It won't be too bad. But I am excited to see what this next year has in store, or what the BCC, I guess, has in store for us next year. And hopefully they just take a look at Oregon, they take a look at Colorado, not at Canada, take a look at, all of the states that have legalized and that are thriving right now. I mean, Oregon is at a point where their ounces are $40. I'm trying to get there. And I hope that for the vendors and all the people that are making those cannabis products out there can stay consistent, because I know that, when you have regulation crackdowns, it causes other companies to, take some shortcuts and stuff like that on their product, and trying to keep that same quality but spend less, which is sometimes pretty hard in this industry. But I think we are coming to about 50 minutes now, which is just about right for my usual time. I want to thank all of you guys for coming, and thank you guys all for believing in the movement, It takes all of us to make a movement, and it's never just one person. So that's why I'm so happy to have you all here every week and getting it done. And, just educating people. We're normalizing this now. It's time. It's time. You know this. I know this. It's time now. But yeah, again, 1,000 times over, you guys are amazing. And deuces.